Was King John of England really the worst monarch of England's history? We remember him from the tales of Robin Hood and the Magna Carta. Inside All About History 114, was the malign monarch really the monster history remembers? In All About History's issues 114, uncover the real story of King John of England, the much maligned monarch, sometimes described as the worst king in England's history, but was he really the monster that many have made him out to be? Was he really much more of a reformer than he's given credit for? How did his dysfunctional family play a role in the man he became? And you can learn more about that in there, All About History 114. The magazine welcomes historian author the relentless King Henry II, his sons, and the wars of the Plantagenet crown, Nick Barrett, to offer his insight into the reign of the King John from his lowly role as the youngest prince, unlikely to inherit anything from his father to become king, sealing the Magna Carta and dragging England into civil war. Now also in All About History, we learn about the anti-lynching campaign of pioneer journalist Ida Wells. Now, but before this, we know King John from Magna Carta. What is the Magna Carta? It's crumbling water stain written in medieval Latin, but the Magna Carta has managed to remain relevant to the cause of human rights even today, 800 years later, after it was scrawled on parchment and affirmed with the sticky wax seal of the English king. England's Great Charter of 1215 was the first document to challenge the authority of the king, subjecting him to the rule of the law and protecting his people from feudal abuse. Along most of the Charter's ideas were revised, although they were revised or have since been repealed, the Magna Carta's fundamental tenets provided the outline for modern democracies. One of its clauses, still in the English law books, has been credited for the first definition of habeas corpus, the universal right to due process in a trial. Taking a cue from the document more than 5 centuries later, American revolutionaries incorporated many of the Magna Carta's basic ideas into another important piece of parchment, of course, the U.S. Constitution. Feudalism was a framework by which all landowning was governed in England during medieval times. It essentially granted the king control of all the land in his kingdom, which was worked by peasants and overseen by feudal barons. Everyone in the hierarchy had financial and social responsibilities to the rank above them, including the barons who reported directly to the king. Most of England's kings did not exercise all of their feudal rights, such as the power to control who their tenants married. That was not the case, however, with King John the ruler, fictionalized by the bad guy in Robin Hood. John's abuses of the feudal system were frequent and angered the barons, who were regularly extorted of their lands and profits. So fed up, in 1215, the barons rebelled and pressured the king into signing the Magna Carta, a list of 63 clauses drawn up to limit King John's power. It was the first time royal authority officially became subject to the law instead of reigning above it. Multiple copies of the parchment were inked and sealed in 1215 and read throughout the kingdom. In 2012, a copy of the Magna Carta created in 1297 was put into a high-tech encasement to protect it. The case was crafted from a single block of aluminum to minimize the number of joints or spots that could cause leaks. And in 2015, researchers with the Magna Carta project, tasked with studying the history of the document ahead of the 800th anniversary, reported that they found an original copy of the Magna Carta in a scrapbook of sorts in Kent, England. The 7th surviving copy of the 13th century, the newfound Magna Carta brings the tally of the number of surviving versions from that century to 24, researchers said. Early colonists sailing over with their rights, tucked inconspicuously near the middle of the Magna Carta, is what historians consider one of the document's most enduring legacies, habeas corpus, or the right to due process, in a trial by jury, is a universal legal concept today, but did not exist in the law books until the barons noted it in the Magna Carta that, quote, No free man shall be seized or imprisoned or stripped of his rights or possessions or outlawed or exiled except by the lawful judgment of his equals or by the law of the land." End quote. Though the statement was not a standout feature of the Magna Carta when it was first published, it was invoked over the centuries, especially during tumultuous times, to preserve civil liberties. The English Civil War crisis of the 17th century was one such time, and it was also during this period that many Englishmen set off for the new countries, the American colonies, and of course Australia and New Zealand. By the mid-18th century, the New World colonies were populated by a group of first-generation New Americans highly educated in English law, such as Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. And at the end of the Revolutionary War, when it was time to draft the Constitution for the new United States of America, those men included the best of the English rights they'd been taught, adapted to the circumstances of the monarch free land. Still of great significance today, the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution reads almost identically to the statute written 575 years before that. This article was originally from Live Science and concerning Magna Carta. Rebellion and myth. King John sealed the Magna Carta, but he's remembered as one of England's worst rulers. He ruled England from May 27, 1199 to October 19, 1216, succeeding from his brother Richard, the Lion-Hearted. John is best known for sealing Magna Carta, as we said, which was the first step towards the Constitution in the United Kingdom and the source of inspiration for democratic movements following that. But he also drew England into a bloody civil war when he renegated on the agreements made in the Magna Carta and was widely hated by contemporary chroniclers. John, King of England, was the last surviving son of Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine, and when he ascended the throne as a fourth Plantagenet monarch, the House of Plantagenet would go on to rule England for 300 years, making it the longest reigning royal house in the country's history. But under John, the Plantagenets lost significant portions of territory, especially in France, as it is in part thanks to failures like that in his reign that John was poorly thought of in his own era, leading to him being depicted as a villain in stories like, of course, Robin Hood. But the picture of King John is not as simple as it might appear, according to some modern scholars. With the passing of time, it's very easy to write simplistic caricatures of long-dead historical figures, such as John, portraying them as good or bad according to our own biases and standards. Nothing is ever that simple. Nick Barrett, who has a PhD in history from King's College London, wrote for All About History magazine. He was born in 1166, would be the youngest of Henry II's 8 legitimate children, with Eleanor of Aquitaine, youngest son, with 3 older brothers ahead of him in the line of succession. John was not expected to become king and was very unlikely to inherit much of his powerful parents. And according to historian Stephen Church, author of King John, England, Magna Carta, and the Making of a Tyrant, it was Henry II that gave John the nickname John Lackland, which was a less than supportive jibe, indicating that he did not expect his son to control much territory in his future. But the territory held between Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine was extensive, stretching from the Pyrenees, southwest France, to the south of the border of Scotland in the north, and how this land would be inherited by their competitive sons would prove to be a point of contention for the family. According to Barrett, the eldest surviving son, Henry would become King of England in an unusual turn of events while his father was still alive. Richard would inherit Aquitaine from his mother. Geoffrey married the heiress of Brittany, bringing the land into their orbit, and the daughters were married for political reasons, influenced around Europe. John was likely to control some portion of Normandy and Anjou, and also Ireland. And with so much land in France, this also caused increasing tensions between Henry II and Louis VII. The French king is said to have played into the familial tension in England to drive a wedge between father and his sons. However, Richard was unwilling to give up Aquitaine to his younger brother on the grounds he had no military or administrative experience. Richard, having fought for 8 years to impose his authority upon Aquitaine, would not surrender from the uncertain authority proposed to Henry's scheme. So John was charged by his father to lead an army into Richard's territory, and aged only 15, John was no match for Richard, even having joined forces with their brother Geoffrey of Brittany. In 1184, Henry II, having returned to the throne after the death of Henry the young king, called his sons together to reconcile their differences. Richard would remain Duke of Aquitaine, but John was knighted and would become Lord of Ireland. He was sent with 300 knights to establish his control over the land. In 1199, Richard the Lionheart died suddenly on campaign while suppressing a revolt in France. He'd been hit by a crossbow bolt and died from the resulting wound, becoming infected. On hearing that John had been named as Richard's heir, two of the late king's most influential officials, William Marsh and Herbert Walter, debated possible alternatives. With his coronation, though, of John, Jock Lachlan was now one of the most powerful men. May 27, 1199, in Western Europe. His early years appeared to have been successful too, with a peace agreement with his former ally Philip Augustus, King of France, in 1200. So after that, of course, onwards and upward for him. I'll leave links below for you for this from Live Science. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.